Hey folks, thanks for stopping by. Today's project is a phone for the kitchen. We're making mason jar lids. Stick around, we'll get started. So let me spend a few seconds talking about stock preparation. I started with a couple of these small turning blocks from Rockler that are 4 inches by 4 inches by 2 inches. I then split one of those horizontally so that I'm left with two 1 inch by 4 inch by 4 inch discs. Then used a compass, or I used a center finder to find the center, and then a compass to mark out a larger circle, which I then took to the bandsaw and nipped the corners off. Mark the inside at 2 7/8 inches, and then that's where we'll pick up at the lathe. One tool that we'll need for this is something that you probably don't already have on the shelf, at least one way of doing it, and that is using a large 2 7/8 inch Forstner bit. I'll put a link down in the description for the Amazon listing for where I got mine. You could also do it with a scraper, but we'll get into that when we get going. Let's get over to the lathe. So I took the blank that I rounded the corners off of and mounted it in my chuck with my largest chuck jaws. I'm going to be using a Forstner bit to drill this out, so I really want some holding power. But if you were using a different tool like a carbide scraper to cut the recess, you could probably get away with a glue block or some other means of holding it. Just remember that you've got to flip this around, so you don't really want to do anything that damages the other surface, like a screw chuck or something like that. So let me get my safety gear on and we will drill this out. This will be a 2 7/8 inch wide hole, and I've marked on my drill bit a depth of about 5/8 of an inch. We'll get started. And because it is such a very large drill bit, I'm going very slow. That is good enough. Now, while I've got it still mounted like this, I'll go ahead and sand this edge, because I'm not going to get a better chance to finish the underside of this. So let me grab some sandpaper and then some Triple E, and I'll get after it. Alright, that looks pretty good. So the question then becomes, how do you mount this to flip it around and be able to turn the other side as well as thin down the rim? The answer is a jam chuck. So I've got a small chunk of wood that I've profiled so that the outside is 2 7/8 inches and it's at least 5/8 of an inch deep, so that I can put a dab of hot melt glue on it, slide the lid on, pull the tailstock up to hold it while the hot glue sets, and then I can turn the profile of the outside of it. So let me get this piece mounted there, and I'll be back. So I've got the chuck mounted, the jam chuck mounted. I've got the lid blank held against it with a dollop of hot glue on the inside, and it should be good to go. I'll leave the rotating tailstock in place for a little while just to make sure that it's not going to fly off in case the hot glue melts, but we'll pull it off in just a minute. Let me first work on thinning down this lip. I tend to like to make a little scoop in this edge just because it gives you your fingers a place to grip. The depth is about right. Let me round over this edge and then we'll work on thinning the top. Just be aware that if you do use a Foster bit to drill this hole, that it does have a slight little cone in the center. So be careful about thinning this down too much. I mean, if you do, it's easy enough to just turn a knob to put in the center of it, but this is probably your thinnest point right in the very center, so just be aware. I'll grab a scraper and I'll just smooth it out a bit. This wood is fairly plain. I think I'm going to grab my texturing tool and see what kind of pattern I can put in it. We'll get a point tool. Delineate it. Well, that'll work. Let me sand it and throw some finish on it. So let's get over to the bench and assemble it. So the only real assembly we have here is how do you put the ring into the lid. You could use a two-part epoxy, but I find that you want a little bit of flexibility because this ring does flex and extend and stretch a little bit as you tighten it down. So I use hot melt glue. It's all you need to do is put a bead of hot melt glue the inside of the lid, drop the ring in and squish it, and then take a jar and tighten it down. Leave that to dry for 10 or 15 minutes and you're good. There's all kinds of options you can do. Like I said, if you go through the center you can put a knob, or you can just choose to put a knob on the top of it. Texturing, pyrography, if you use something like maple that takes dye really well, you can make some really beautiful lids. So that's it. If it's your first time here, be sure to hit subscribe, comment, like, tell me what you like, tell me what you don't like. Always happy to get feedback. Take care.